Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, removing career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income.
Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Aaron Urban. I'm a certified executive career accelerator coach, and what I do is I help driven, emerging, and evolving leaders like yourself remove those pesky career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. And today we'll be talking about that impact factor, most specifically the neuroscience of anxiety and stress and how to leverage neuroscience to manage this very VUCA world and experience that we're having right now. I don't know about you, but I certainly do see a lot of anxiety and stress coming up either in the clients that I coach or even in myself because we have such a strong change cycle right now. So this is number 4 of the Forbes Coaches Council Spotlight series. I'm super excited to have this series on Career Coffee Chat Live and podcast. If you're watching the podcast later, please give us a thumbs up, a likes, or give us a star rating. We appreciate your feedback. It means a lot to us. And make sure that we continue to have great guests on the Career Coffee Chat show. And without further ado, let's learn more about who we're having on the great show today, because you will be excited to learn more about the neuroscience of confidence with Arthi Rabikrisson. Now, if you've ever wished that you could show up more confidently, reduce stress, anxiety, particularly in high-pressure situations, you're in the right place today. Our special guest, Arthi Rabikrisson, who is an MBA and a ICF accredited coach. Well, she will share how to leverage Neuro-Agility to reduce stress while boosting confidence. And I don't know about you, but I am definitely ready to learn more about that. So we're going to discover the role of neuroscience in this very changed VUCA world. I mean, it's very volatile, uncertain. There's a lot of changes going on. We had a lot of change going into the pandemic. Now we're having changes coming out of the pandemic. Now we have a third wave. Oh my gosh, all the things at once. So let's learn about how neuroscience can boost your confidence and cope with stress more effectively. Now, Arthi is a founder and managing director of Prerna Advisory based in South Africa. So give her a round of applause for coming in from South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a big deal. And she focuses on neuroscience-based coaching and assessments for individuals, teams, and corporations. So I'm super excited to bring to you Arthi. Arthi, great to see you. Yay.
It's so wonderful to be here, Erin. Thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic because, I'm a neuroscience nerd. And I get really riled up. I was like, we're going to have this science talk about confidence and anxiety. Because here's the thing. Some of you may know, and Arthi, I think we may have chatted about this as well. Yeah. For several months now, I've been really diving deep and working on anxiety because I actually suffer from anxiety. Now, as someone who identifies as being a very driven professional, this is hard for me to accept.
Yeah, yes.
Because
understandably so.
Yeah, it's too easy to say, that's a weakness. But it's not a weakness, is it?
It's not. Absolutely isn't.
No.
And, the interesting about what she's saying is it's perceived as a weakness, but actually it can be one of your biggest strengths, Erin. And if we understand how our brain is working when it comes to anxiety and how we are actually apportioning what we're using towards stress and managing and coping with stress, then it actually makes it a little bit easier because we want to bring everything up to the conscious level so that we could work with it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of coaching. Anybody who is a coach knows that the beauty of coaching is the increase in neuroplasticity, which is the ability for the brain to form and accept new ideas and and accept new ways of being. As you start to learn more about neuroscience, you realize that you have so much more potential. And there's so many really great tools you can leverage to boost your confidence, to reduce the anxiety, to show up in your life how you want to show up.
Absolutely. And one of the key ones that I've actually picked up from that, Erin, is the concept of neuro-agility, which you mentioned in the introduction to me. And that's something that's kind of new, but then again, the whole what we're learning about neuroscience, about our brain and our nervous system, this is all new stuff, which is very exciting because there's new information coming to the fore. But the whole idea behind Neuro-Agility is understanding the impact on the different brain elements in terms of our speed, ease, and flexibility to be able to deal with things like cope with stress, to be able to cope with how we actually manage it, and put ourselves under a less pressurized sort of immediate sort of impact or consequence. So Neuro-Agility then helps us understand about, well, maybe in very colloquial terms, crossing the midline. So what are we doing to actually stretch the way we are thinking? What are we doing to help manage the allostatic load when it comes to dealing with stress? And it actually talks about the different sort of neurophysiological factors that we can look at, as well as what are the drivers behind it. And there's so many benefits around it as well. So it is one of the newer sort of concepts out there. I don't know if many people are aware of it, but certainly it's something that's quite measurable. It's something that can give us a space to understand both at an organizational level as well as at a personal level about, well, how am I showing up, like you said? Is this the best version of me in terms of what I'm able to showcase in terms of my work? What am I able to do from a problem-solving sort of perspective as well? And all of these things are confidence boosters and stress reducers too. So those are some of the elements that are covered within the concept of Neuro-Agility.
This is really fascinating. So I'm super excited to learn more about it and dive into a little bit about. But first, I want to know, what inspired you to learn more about neuroscience? Because everybody has a reason. I know my reason is I'm kind of nerdy, and behavioral science is my jam, right? Yeah. I just love that. And the more I learn about it, the more I realize we have so much more power than we give ourselves credit for over our own experiences, our life experiences. Yeah. So what was your catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, I must say it was my own personal development, actually, that started the whole process. While I was doing my MBA, it was a core module as part of the MBA to do a personal development module. And part of that was obviously developing your self-awareness, your understanding of self. It's just fascinating because we don't intentionally do that, do we? Unless we're forced to. And this was sort of...
We really don't.
We don't.
We're all operating 90% of the time on automatic, sometimes more than that. It's a little scary.
Exactly. And I loved the insights that I got from it. And I said to myself, well, I'm finding such great power in this. I need other people to also find this power. So I started to gravitate into coaching a lot more. And then I said, okay, but I need to know what I'm doing here. I need the right tools. I need the right framework as a coach. So I decided to do some certification, which I did. And within that certification course was a very well-known program that we now know about called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Yeah, exactly. And that just blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And I said to myself, but this is the crux of it. Us understanding at the very root of who we are, why we behave, where the emotions emanate from. And obviously within NLP, the habits, the patterns, the scripts, the mental models, all of those concepts that we know of. So that's what really started the journey. It was very much that almost borderline clinical NLP. But beyond that, that's when I started to realize, okay, but I want to go more into the brain, the nervous system. I want to understand that in deeper clarity. So I started to migrate a little bit from NLP into that space. And that's where I found myself now. It's just because it's such uncharted territory, we're learning so much. I love that. So that's what spurred me on. And I realized as a coach, this was something I wanted to bring in terms of my practice. I wanted my coachees to really bring to the fore, okay, beyond the emotion, where is this emanating from? Which part of your brain? Let's bring this to consciousness. Let us understand what neurotransmitters are actually going on in your body when you're feeling stressed or when you're feeling absolute bliss and joy. So that's how it all started for me.
Right. And giving them the tools to where they can expand and just really thrive. And be more agile. be adaptive, because right now with such strong change,
Yeah.
it's so incredibly important to be more balanced and centered, yet agile and positively responsive to the scenarios. Hussein, which welcome to the show. Good to see you. He said training, repetition, rehearsals, preparing for material, expected questions, and not answering hesitantly are all parts of what he considers competence.
Okay.
So that is certainly, his definition of competence. So it sounds like Hussein, you're a very data analytical individual. Share with me if that sounds and resonates true with you. And Linda mentioned, she said, good morning, tuning in from Kingwood, Texas. Glad to see you again, Linda. And we are more than happy to share more about neuroscience because it's so awesome. I'm like a little kid in a candy factory with neuroscience. So
Wonderful.
we were talking about Neuro-Agility.
Yeah.
Arthi, do you think I kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit, or how can you expand upon that? Because right now we're in such strong change.
Yeah.
Anxiety and stress is like everywhere right now.
Yeah.
People are experiencing more of that. More people who haven't experienced it in the past are experiencing that for various reasons. How can Neuro-Agility either apply or adopt and help in these scenarios? What does that look like at a very fundamental level?
Okay. No, that's a as you said, it's a key question to answer. And I think the first thing that we need to recognize, and you know this very well, Erin, is that stress is actually perceived. And it's our mental models that help us perceive the intensity and the frequency of the stress. So that's the thing I want to start.
May I quote Shakespeare? Or misquote Shakespeare, as the case is probably will happen. I'll misquote Shakespeare.
Yep.
Nothing is neither good nor bad except thinking that makes it so.
Exactly it. So, when and each of us will have our own sort of barometer, our own spectrum of how we're perceiving that stress. It comes down to our wiring. It comes down to the scripts we've learned, the cues that we've learned through traditions, through things that have happened to us as well. And, you're also familiar with the stress curve by McEwen, where you can have eustress, which is good stress, you can have tolerable stress, and you can have distress. And that all is about how do we cope with our perceived stress. Obviously, if we're perceiving our stress to be something that we can manage, we can cope, it's very positive for us. So let me go into the brain science of it. When you've got positive stress, eustress, you're actually activating new neural pathways. You're new habits. Your hippocampus is going into overdrive. Your amygdala is going into that beautiful phase of wanting to innovate and create. When your perceived stress is going into the distress area, that's when things go a little bit pear-shaped, because then your brain is saying, I can't cope with this. I don't have the mental models in place for this. And that's when you start to see the fight or flight kind of mode coming in. Or sometimes even freeze, because you get a bit of brain fog, paralysis. Your amygdala immediately wants you to do something about it. And that's when you start to find like, I'm slowing down. I don't know what to do. So it's different in terms of how you would then work with that. And from a neuro-agility perspective now, if you understand that, okay, this is how I deal with stress. This is how I perceive the world. This is how I work with stimuli, because that's one of the key things around neuro-agility. It's understanding how does my brain respond to the sensory cues that are coming to me? How does my intelligence preference also overlay on top of that? So all of these factors will then sort of help me understand, what do I need to do then to manage the stress better? And, just to fast forward a little bit, it actually then means that we can look to build resilience. And that's some of the key things that we could do, from understanding how neuro-agile we are, because we have to measure where we are at this point in time before we can do any interventions like what Hussein mentioned, like training and rehearsals and repetition. Those are all things that we can do to help us build resilience, to help us with coping with stress, to help us boost our confidence. But we have to kind of start with where we're at the moment. If you don't know where you're at, how are you going to know what the plan or the roadmap is to get to where you want to go? right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I
So,
mean,
so absolutely valid, Hussein, in terms of the comments there. But I just wanted to take it to that first sort of foundational phase, as you said, Erin, about
that's really
where we're
important.
dealing with
Yeah,
stress.
knowing where you are right now. And Linda mentioned too, she says, our lives are moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts, negative or positive. Amen, sister. You're
Mm,
right on that. And hi,
mm,
Glenn, tuning in from Washington, D.C. Good to see you. Glenn Wiggins tuning in as well. So for those
okay.
of you who are tuning in right now, or, hanging out, listening, and haven't necessarily hopped on yet, come on in. We'd love to welcome you and share with us, what's going on? What is your prevailing thoughts right now? Or do you find yourself really kind of almost lingering in that stress mode where you're like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I can't deal with this. Or are you one of those people who are like, okay, I see what's going on. I have the tools, and you're thinking through processes, or let me know, where are you there? Because it's important to understand what is your natural inclination when it comes to VUCA, or stress environments. So that's volatile, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous.
Yeah.
And those types of environments tend to tax the nervous system because we don't have scripts written for them. And just in case you don't already know, and of course, Arthi, you are fully aware of this, 90% of our existence is by script. And that's for a good reason. I mean, just imagine if you had to get up every morning and then learn how to brush your teeth every day. That would not work. So clearly we have to develop scripts to be more effective and efficient in our lives. But some of these scripts are holding us back, and almost all of them, in fact, are totally unconscious. So part of what we're doing here is we're challenging you to make the unconscious conscious.
Yeah.
Start to understand, okay, what are my triggers? Is it my mother-in-law? Is it that thought about going into the office again? Or what are we talking about here? What's stressing us out? What are our triggers and why? So
Yes. I loved what you said about the conscious and the unconscious. And it's making me think of, as you said, we have these automated habits, right? And that's in our fast thinking mode of our brain. We just do it like that. You're taking a drive to the supermarket, the roads. Sometimes you're not really paying attention because you just kind of know it. You need to go, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't put your brain into overwhelm or additional stress because you've learned it, you know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Problem starts to come in for us, I think, is when we go into that slow thinking mode, because then it's very conscious. And that's when you are actually having to put time and brain energy into thinking about something. So, when you're in a stressful situation, it's new. And like you said, Erin, VUCA is disruptive. It's shifting paradigms. And when you're in that, you don't have that mental model, you don't have that script, you're slow thinking is starting to come through from your brain. And that's where, a lot of the tension starts to build up because, like you said, there's comfort in the scripts. And if you don't have it, you're suddenly in this discomfort. And if you have some sort of a mechanism, and I'm obviously going to call this resilience, but if you've built up some level of resilience, that'll help you to cope in this VUCA environment. And that's where, the concept of neuro-agility and measuring where you are and obviously optimizing your brain performance is where you're going to see the biggest benefit coming out of it, because that's really going to stretch that opportunity set for you, so that no matter what the paradigm is, whether it's a volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous situation you're in, you've got some of the key fundamental tools to work with. And from there, you can actually then come up with solutions thinking mode and creativity mode in your slow thinking mode. So it's quite important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm 100% there with you, Arthi. And also leaning a little bit into positive psychology when it comes to resilience. Some research in positive psychology has found that and again, when we talk about positivity here, we're not talking about head in the sand, ignoring the world and being unrealistic. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when you're presented with a change challenge, what is your first gut reaction or your unconscious script that comes to the fore? And sometimes this is defined for you early in childhood, depending on your familial models. Okay. Whether or not you tend to be more negative or whether you see potentials and opportunities. So that really depends on some of the pre-existing gravitational mental field, if you will. What do you gravitate towards? And that will define, by and large, what your resilience quota might be and how agile you can be at the moment. Because if you can default towards the sky is falling, everything is awful, you're probably not going to be, one, as agile as you would like to be, and two, be able to handle that in a healthy and balanced way. So let's challenge Arthi to come up with, if you tend towards the negative, and by the way, we all do to a certain degree, because evolution, the theory of evolution has said, well, when it comes to mental models like this, those of us who have survived over the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years have been because we were smart and ran away from the tiger. Okay. We were afraid. So because we saw things negatively, I said, oh, let's get the tiger, and then got mauled. Those survived were more negatively biased. So when you are confronted, it's natural to be that way. But there's, again, everything in balance. So if we tends to be more on the negative side, then what do we do? How do we become aware? And then what are some steps that we can take to be more agile?
Very, very important. And, I would almost say that the majority of us are actually starting off with that negative space. And it is because of those mental models, of those biases that we have. And by the way, I just want to put it out there. We all have biases. in then, there's so many biases. We can't even name them all in our chat today. But they are really these biases that we're running, either for ourselves or either for others. So we're judging at different stages. And it's so interesting what you say about the fact that these models come up through childhood, because it does. We're born free. We're born with innocence. But over time, it's learned and habits are formed. And that's where we start to actually dim a little bit of that freedom that comes up with us. And what actually ends up happening from a positive psychology point of view is we've got these saboteurs, these little voices, this inner dialogue that kind of says to you, but you're less than, you're not good enough. The doubt starts to creep in. And these start to get bigger and bigger if there's reinforcing circumstances that cause it to get bigger. And typically when we're in adulthood and we're in the work environment, then we suddenly find, oh, but I've got nerves around doing a presentation, or I can't speak up in a meeting, and there's no way I can approach the CEO. All of these things are holding us back. So, it's interesting because it's so topical. There's so much being talked about, for example, imposter syndrome at the moment, right? People asking, is this real? Is it not? And I always say it is real. It is real in the moment. But that's the thing. It's in the moment. If it lasts longer and beyond that, then there's actually a much deep-seated problem, much more deep-seated problem there. And that probably needs a lot more work. So, in terms of if you're sitting in that mindset, and obviously it depends on how far in the negative you're sitting as well, because if you're quite far down, it's going to take a lot more work. But certainly if you're sitting in that negative space, you do want to move into, from a fixed sort of mindset into that growth sort of mindset. And there's ways to go about it. First thing is you need to understand exactly what it is you're working with at this stage. And I would say it's not an easy task to do this. You would need some support to be able to do it. So someone like a coach or someone like a very good supporter, a mentor even could be somebody that you could work with. But you kind of need to understand where you're at this point in time, because that's the starting point. If you don't know, like I said, you're not going to have a roadmap, and how are you going to get there? Okay. The second thing is once you know where you're at, part of that needs to be about identifying, well, what are the triggers that are causing this inner dialogue to come in that's telling me I'm less than? Identify those triggers. It's really important. And what that means is you're going to the root cause of the problem. It's not just a quick fix type of a thing. You're not just massage the symptoms. You're actually going to say, okay, I'm being triggered because this happened to me in my past, and that caused me to feel this way. So whenever my brain finds a pattern in a current situation, it takes me back to that memory, and it takes me back to that particular feeling. And that's the feeling that comes now. Because that's the other interesting to note about our brain, is that our memories are actually imperfect the more we recall them, because we're overlaying current experiences. But the emotion attached to that experience does not change. So that's the important thing I want our viewers to remember, that we actually have to work on changing the emotion with that old memory and building something new. Because then when we have future oncoming circumstances, a new emotion is actually going to be replaced. And that's part of building those new neural pathways with new habits.
Yeah, that's a little bit of CBT too, cognitive behavioral therapy.
That's right.
When you're discussing when it comes to memories. And by the way, for those of you tuning in and you're not familiar with this particular topic, emotions are like the calling card for the brain. So it's almost like an index card to tell your brain, okay, so this kind of emotion is going on. We got to run the script. In very simplistic terms. Okay.
Yeah.
It also has to do with situational triggers and the like. But if we can start to shift the narrative, because it will build up what I call cognitive drift. We call cognitive drift over time because, as you mentioned before, the more times you recall something, the more time it tends to drift and have almost like calcification, if you will. And then we put more ideasms on it and our take, and we build it up, and it becomes this thing that it may not actually be. So if you're struggling with this and you're not sure, you're like, okay, well, I've got a little anxiety or stress around XYZ scenario. And I'm having trouble, kind of wrapping my head around this and where my standpoint is. And I don't really have access to a coach or a mentor right now. Here's a thought for you. And Arthi, let me know how you feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
Think about your familial structure. So who did you grow up around? Would you say objectively that they tend to more positive and they see opportunities? Or are they one of these people who are more survivalist? They're like, oh my gosh, well, we have to tuck in and hoard and hide and that sort of thing. Because I'll share with you that I grew up, now this is something I've never shared live, FYI. My family, I came from a family of survivalists, literal survivalists. Like the year 2000, everything was going to end. That's how I grew up. So it's taken me a lot of focused work to let go of the fear and scarcity model, which is causing some of the current anxiety, because now that I've moved my mother closer to me, she's bringing up a lot of those old scripts that no longer gel with where I want to be, and creating a lot of friction internally. So I'm having to address those and deal with them one at a time, right?
Yeah.
And the good news is we're seeing progress, but it's important to be aware of the why, what's going on there, and being able to show up intentionally, right, in that space. I want to say hi to Gerald, who's tuned in. He said, my basic philosophy is no thought before it's time. Many things take care of themselves. True, they can. And if we can approach it more cognitively, intentionally, we can probably handle it a little bit more effectively and be more agile in the moment. Because if you're not aware of your triggers, the chances of you repeating a negative cycle is very high.
True. Absolutely true. When you started, and thank you so much for sharing your personal story, Erin. That's quite beautiful. I grew up in apartheid South Africa. It was very difficult. There was so much of biases, stereotypes, prejudices, and I must say, growing up, my parents cocooned my brother and I from that. But what I always knew was the work ethic in our household was you just work hard, and you're working hard for tomorrow, for a brighter future, for things to get better. And obviously, once apartheid was dismantled, I was still young. I was still in school when that happened. But, 20 some odd years later, fast forward, we're still dismantling so much of those biases and stereotypes till today. Mm-hmm. And what I go back to is seeing what my parents were doing in terms of working hard, the tenacity, the idea that put your shoulder to the wheel, get things done. And that's a script that runs with me today. When I was facing challenges as well, I kind of said to myself, well, I kind of need to grit my teeth and push through. And that was a script that was running from what I used to see happening from my parents. And if you think about today, have I refined that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've had other experiences as well that have sort of said to me, but hang on here. There's other things that need to come into play as well. There's things around me knowing myself Am I always going to go into hyperachiever type of mode every time something bad comes my way? What does that do for me in terms of my energy, in terms of my sort of ability to kind of weed out what's important and what's not? Is it driving me towards my purpose? So all of these things come and overlay over the script. And now, thankfully, I've put in some things that alleviate the pressure, alleviate the stress. Because when you're at it all the time, you're unconsciously adding to that allostatic load that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And you can very easily tip over into distress as a result. So part of what we're saying, I guess, Erin, is knowing those triggers actually helps you to reduce your stress, because you're going to know how to cope with it better. You're going to know what are the key things that work for you, whether it's having accountability partners, whether it's being able to take a time out, whether it's about, going into mindfulness, meditation, restorative sort of practices as well that can help you. Yeah, these are the things. These are the things that are actually going to help us. So those triggers, understanding the models, understanding the scripts, dismantling them, quite importantly, is what we need to do to help us.
And Linda brought out, she said, I'm dealing with the same issue of my survival mentality, particularly the upbringing and now taking care of her mother. So I found that with my mother, and I love my mother dearly, don't get me wrong, but now that she's closer to me, a lot of these things that I really haven't dealt with for a while are starting to come up again, and I need to dismantle them and decouple them from my psyche, because it's not a part of how I want to show up in the world, right? And so she asked, these roots are surfacing now for her, and is there any suggestions of what she can read or do to help? So Arthi, do you have any books about particularly stress, anxiety, neuroscience, or neuro-agility that you would recommend for someone to sink their teeth into and maybe help them get past, or any courses that you have or insights or blogs that you have available?
Yeah. Look, I mean, like I said, from a neuro-agility perspective, it's still very new. I myself do a particular assessment which helps people understand where they're actually at. So from a measurement point of view, there's that's available. But, my go-to book is actually one that everyone knows about, but it's such a brilliant book. And I always suggest this to people, because what we're talking about is breaking habits. So obviously the seven effective habits of highly effective people, that's the one, Stephen R. Covey. So that one is one that I typically recommend, because we're talking about what are those patterns, what are those habits that we need to cultivate to make us feel more effective. And remember this, viewers, it's not about what we're doing for others, it's about what we're doing for ourselves here. And I know some people will say, but that's selfish, I want to be able to do for others. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can actually help anyone else. So think about it from that way. Yeah, exactly. So
when you give something you don't have.
Exactly. And we could go on with the analogies, the half is half, is it empty, or half full kind of a thing that goes to the mindset sort of way of looking at it. But, I would definitely say to Linda, pick up books or pick up articles that deal with helping you to break patterns. And I know going into the neuroscience of it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, but that's why it's nice to have some sort of an accountability partner hand in hand with you. Somebody who, like a coach, somebody like a mentor, somebody who's trusted, who you can kind of say, I feel like I'm showing up in this way. Like you said, I'm in survival mode. Is this true? And how can I reflect on that? And what you'd be able to then get is the kind of insights that will help you think, oh, okay, now that I know this, what can I change about it? And
what's the narrative and how can I rescript?
How can I rescript it? And the good thing about a coaching environment is somebody's not telling you what to do. It's not prescriptive. You end up coming up with the solution on your own. And I find that that's quite powerful, because actually we do have the solutions at hand. We're just too scared to look at them in the mirror.
And we take a lot of things at maybe face value too, because I see it happen all the time. Well, this is kind of always the way it's been, and we'll just keep going this way because it's a part of what we know and becomes a part of our script and a part of the normal for us. Oh, it doesn't need to be. So, Linda, for you, I would recommend, and what I'll do also is I'll post this in the live show comments and the notes, but you can find this on my website under courses. It's totally free. It's the Mindset Reset Bootcamp, and part of it includes my Managing Emotions guide and the Managing Emotions diagnostic log as well, which I find very, very useful. If we're particularly unpacking something specific, we want to identify the triggers, become more aware about it, then maybe re-script it to something more positive. And if we're dealing with a family member, one of the things that helps me is a little bit more tactical is when I'm going to my mother, I just really have to put myself in a state of unconditional love and a state of awareness that she will trigger me. And it's up to me to respond from a centered and more balanced standpoint. So I take lots of deep breaths before I, say anything or respond or even commit to emotion, because your first response is automatic. You can't do anything about that. But what you do after that is up to you. Yeah. So a part of it is like, okay, first breathe, smile. Because it tends to put you in a better mood, whether you like it or not. The actual act of smiling helps tremendously. Then what positive can you take out of this? Where can you go in a more positive standpoint? And let it go. Like relax and try to let things go. Because here's a little tidbit. Whenever we allow someone else to imposition on our emotions, we're giving our power away to them.
Absolutely. I love that. I especially love how you've put together your coping mechanism, Erin. And that's so powerful because, like you're saying, it's not difficult things for ourselves in order to be able to cope with the stress or to cope with the anxiety. And you figured out restorative ways to do it. Deep breathing, taking a moment to smile. I mean, these things are easy enough for us to do. So it's that level of mindfulness, because you identify that, my mom does trigger me, then this is what I need to do. So absolutely. It's as simple as some of these things that we've mentioned, viewers, that, it could be just taking a walk, putting on your favorite music, something that is a mood lifter. That's what you're really looking for, because anything that's going to get your oxytocin, your serotonin, all these good neurotransmitters going, elevate your mood. That's what's going to help you feel more productive, better. So that even when you're facing something, it's going to be challenging for you, you automatically are in a better position to deal with it because you've lifted your mood and you'll be able to cope with it better.
And when you're facing something that's big and complex, know that you don't have to plow through it, looking at it as this big thing. Everything can be broken down into smaller components.
Correct.
Something as simple, well, I say simple. Job search, for example. I was talking to a client just the other day, and I was like, okay, so we wrapped up our job search strategy call. I was like, how do you feel? I could tell from his tone of voice something was amiss. I was like, I hear something. Something's not quite. I can hear that you're not feeling excited. And I said, is that true for you? And he said, yes. He goes, this sounds like a lot of work. And he goes, he's very overwhelmed in a very toxic environment where he is now, and a job search. So it's like, to him, he's just seeing all the things, right? And I said, well, we'll call him Sam. So I said to Sam, what you could do, instead of looking at it as a big thing, look at the different individual components. So maybe you look at 3 or 4 jobs today. Maybe you optimize or scan your resume tomorrow. Maybe you do a few tweaks. Maybe you apply. You don't have to do it all at once. And he goes, oh, he's not really thought about it like that. So instead of just confronting it, sometimes when something is, we elevate the significance of something, it also elevates our stress response.
Absolutely.
When we first started talking, nothing is either good nor bad except our thinking that makes it so. And Cheryl has some good insights too, Arthi. I'd love to share this with everyone. You said, I think the basic formula is 1, recognize it. 2, raise it to the level of consciousness, so making the unconscious conscious. 3, change it, so rescript or refocus or rephrase or change. Can we change our emotional response? Push it back down to the subconscious. He said level 1 is the hardest for him, and it often helps to have a third party call it out for you. Yes, because oftentimes we're not sometimes aware.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. And Gerald, thank you. That's brilliant. And I guess what I would add to that is repeat and practice, because that's what's really going to make it stick. So that when you are facing a particular challenge, even an opportunity, I mean, let's also think about the positive end of it. Sometimes we don't know how to cope in the face of a fantastic opportunity in our career or in our work life. But if we're actually knowing what the issue is around that, and like Gerald is saying, we're figuring out a new way to deal with it. We're going to put it in our subconscious, but we must keep repeating it, because then it becomes something that just immediately happens, even on a positive or on a negative way.
Yeah. Well, Arthi, I would love, before we wrap up the show, to hear, based on your experiences and the coaching work that you're doing, what's coming up the most for people, and what are some tactical takeaways that our viewers, our listeners can absorb and maybe work into their daily lives to help them show up as the better human that they want to be, in a less stressed, less anxious, and more confident way?
Lovely, lovely. Thank you, Erin. I mean, what I'm seeing at the moment from a lot of my coachees and just general conversation with people is they're feeling under so much of time pressure. And, it's obviously because of a culmination of so many things, the pandemic stretching out for longer than anyone anticipated, remote working, children being online at home, online schooling, all of these things that have come to the fore. And everyone in some shape or form has said to me, I'm just busy. I don't have time to do the things that I really want to be doing. And I actually wrote an article on this on Forbes Coaches Council. So anyone is free to go and have a look at that, where I actually applied my mind and I said, well, we keep putting this narrative in place that we're so busy. When did we actually lose the ability to actually control time? Because it is our control. And my suggestions, and what I'm calling it, is to become more time affluent, is what we need to get back to again. So yes. Yeah, exactly. So we are in this VUCA world. We are feeling the time pressure. So what can we actually do then to make ourselves feel less stress when it comes to managing time, is also feel more confident that we can do things that we want to be doing. So, and it's already some of the things that we've spoken about, Erin. So for example, find ways to actually slow down, because slowing down also helps your brain to process. So things like, waking up 10 minutes after the alarm has gone off. I mean, that's okay. 10 minutes just to slow things down. You don't need to get up as soon as the alarm goes off. Ease into your day. Other ways in terms of slowing down time for yourself is to savor that cup of coffee. We're having a coffee chat today. So savor that coffee that you're having. Smell it, taste it, feel the warm cup. Those are ways of slowing time down. Make your moments meaningful. We talked about breathing. Sometimes a deep inhale, a deep exhale is all that we need, just to get the blood rushing to the brain in the correct way, not into alleviating stress, but actually just re-energizing ourselves. So that's what we're going to do as well. Those mindful moments that I mentioned, something like the coffee, something like listening to music, something like enjoying your walk out in the garden, looking at the beautiful flower, just being in the moment. It's mindfulness at its best. It's simple things, but actually it's making you more time rich, because it's beautiful things that you would enjoy doing that then makes you feel happy. So identify those mindful moments for yourself, viewers. The other one, and big one, Erin, and I'm sure you hear this often. We're not good at saying no to things. Right? We don't put up these boundaries like we should. We take on so much at any given point in time. And the thing is, do we really need to be doing all of that at this point in time? Is everything a priority at this point in time? No. So this is it. That's the key word. We need to learn to say no. And that is about prioritizing, eliminating the unwanted, as well as moving out and shifting what we don't need to do right now, because everything is not urgent. Let's remember that. Okay?
Yeah.
The final one I would sort of leave our viewers with is build yourself a time bank. And I love this concept, a time bank. What it means is if you've done something, reward yourself for it. So if you've done this particular task, you needed to get it done, and it's done and dusted, reward yourself with some time, me time. That time, bank it. Build it up to a half an hour, build it up to an hour, build it up into days if you need to. But keep that time bank available and call on that time bank when you really need it most.
Mm-hmm.
I need time out. If it means I'm going for my long 1 hour run or I'm just dancing, whatever it is that you love to do, that time bank is for you and for self-care.
That's a great concept. I actually block out days in my calendar, or blocks of time on my calendar, because I found them actually vastly more productive when I work 4 hours a day versus 8.
Brilliant.
However, let's caveat that. Those times that I'm not working, I'm doing something that is personally energy giving. So if you're doing something that's energy draining, chances are you're not going to be that productive the remaining 4 hours. But I'm doing something that's energy giving, like exercising, or I'm doing something rewarding and fulfilling. Maybe it's creative or innovative, but it's giving me energy. And that's the point, is I'm actually working less and you're being vastly more productive.
Yes.
So Hussein asked he always asks the really good questions. So all right, well, let's try this one on. Okay, he said, how big is the impact of traditions, religions, and upbringing on the cultivation or removal of confidence?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's the big one. It's a big question. The big question to end on here in the Career Coffee Chat show. So,
I would say, Hussein, I think you already know the answer to this question, and it does have a big impact. Because we're born into certain traditions, certain cultures, certain norms. It's that familial environment that we're growing up with. So that is shaping how we actually see the world. That's part of the biases that I mentioned earlier. It's the lens with which we're looking at the world. And for each of us, it is unique. It is subjective. So from a confidence perspective, yes, as Aaron was talking about earlier, if you're in an environment that is very positively disposed to doing things, very positive sort of mindset, that's going to rub off on you. Similarly, if you're in a less than positive, in a darker sort of environment in a way, that's also going to leave its impression on you. And if we don't actually work on those, it does play out. It does make you vulnerable to stress, to not being able to cope, to being let down, to all of those negative emotions that we don't really want to do. The good news is, because we know that the brain can change how we respond to these things, we can change it. So, you're never what you started off with. You can amend it. You can change it. You can teach that old dog new tricks. Absolutely. So as much as traditions have shaped us, we can actually do things to decode it and implant something new. Put a new tape in, something that we love.
This is wonderful, Arthi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a very deep and enriching conversation. And I forget who said this, and I really do need to track it down, but it was a psychologist who mentioned that neuroplasticity is a hope for human mankind.
Yeah.
And it's basically because we are able, into quite advanced age, to be neuroplastic. In other words, to accept, form new ideas, new ways of being, new modalities. You can be anything you want to be. You have such great potential. We need to understand that and embrace that and accept it. That's the first thing, is being able to allow that for yourself, and then start to understand, okay, I can allow this for myself. Where am I now? And based on where my goals are, where do I want to grow? That's true. That's true to me.
I love that.
So, it's been a great pleasure, and such wonderful seeing all of you today. I am thrilled to have you tune in, and if you are watching the replay later, please do feel free to reach out to either one of us directly if you have a question, or pop it in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them. If you're watching the replay later, or if you watched this show live and you're really excited about it, want to share it with your network, please don't hesitate to share with your network, because it's all about spreading the knowledge, and knowledge is vast power and impact. So here's to increasing that influence, income, and impact for each one of you. And my wishes for all of you friends: keep elevating.
Thank you for tuning in on the Career Coffee Chat podcast. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is coacheurban@gmail.com or tweet at coacheurban, Instagram coach.eurban, or reach out to my Facebook group, Elevate Your Career. So I'd love to learn more about you, hear your insights, and what questions you have. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And don't forget, please do reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Erin Urban. Until next time, cheers. Here's to caffeinating your career.